Good morning, everybody. Hi there. It is Tuesday morning. Here we are at another week, start of another week. As you all know, last week I was told that I jump in far too fast in terms of starting to talk. So I'm just going to give everybody a little bit of time to join us here this morning. Hope everybody's really well. I hope your week's going really well. Hope you got some downtime on the weekend. I certainly find that we seem to get from Tuesday to Tuesday really, really quickly, don't we? Which, anyway, that's okay. I hope you've got your cup of tea. Have you? Mine's this one today. I love a good cup which has something inspirational on it to keep us all moving. So, yeah. So what I will do, I can see we've got a few people with us now. So nice to see you all, guys. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm really excited this morning because actually I'm going to be having a conversation with a really incredible person who is actually playing a really important role for us here in terms of the campaign to get an independent candidate to Canberra for the North Sydney, and she's just an all-round great person. So I'm going to jump to her in a minute, but just before I do, I mean, you guys know that I quite often just like to check in and talk about how the campaign is going. You know, I think it's fair to say we're in week 9 now since we launched, and it's been such an incredible experience since I was named as the candidate for the federal seat of North Sydney at the next federal election, running as an independent. But the thing that's really struck me this past week is twofold. Firstly, it's really exciting for me to see that there are a number of incredible candidates standing up in other electorates who are very similar to me and stand for the same sort of politics that we want to see being experienced here in Australia. So I want to give a really special shout out to them and to say that it is a real, it's exciting to see you guys jump into this race, and I think it's an important conversation that we're driving. We have Georgia Steele, who is running for Hughes. Georgia is an incredible powerhouse when it comes to business experience, and much like me, just couldn't sit down any longer and couldn't see her electorate continue to be represented by a man that, you know, many feel has lost his connection to that space. Also Penny Ackery, who was only announced in this last few days actually, who's running in Hume, which is down around that Goulburn area. For her, she'll be running against Angus Taylor. And I think she, again, is an incredible story of a local woman who simply feels like enough is enough. You know, that the most important thing we can be doing is bringing the voice of residents back in to politics. And so, you know, I think Penny, she's been launched with a fanfare. There were over 300 people in a community town hall to meet her. So I think she's doing a really amazing and brave thing. And then down in Victoria, Rob Priestley is running in Nichols. And having spoken to Rob, you know, he's somebody who has a really strong connection to his local community and is very motivated to be doing, you know, as much as he can for the community going forward. So, of course, that's my doorbell, always goes in the middle when you've got something else on, but we're just going to leave that. I'm sure everybody's can leave a parcel or maybe drop a message. From my perspective, so what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to find our guest for today, and she is right here. I'm very to be joined by Aneka Henshaw. So Aneka is 19 years old and lives with us here in the North Sydney electorate. Hi Aneka, morning.
Hi.
Hi, great to see you.
My connection's quite bad. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I can hear you. Okay.
That's okay.
I
think I
Wi-Fi
have quite
modem to like right here.
I think I have quite an old attitude to technology because when something doesn't quite work, I actually move closer to it, hoping that it might help it work, or I give it
I don't think that's an old attitude. I did the exact same thing.
Okay, so I'm going to let myself off then. To everybody who's joining us here this morning, as I was just saying, so Aneka lives here in our North Sydney electorate. I'm going to let her talk a little bit about herself. But really importantly, Aneka is the incredibly brave person who stood up to help us coordinate KTNextGen, or Kylea Tink Next Generation, which is actually the extension of our campaign to make sure that we are working and operating in such a way that the voices of those under the age of 30 are really being listened to and deeply involved in the way that our campaign progresses. So thanks for joining this morning, Aneka. Can you tell everybody a little bit about who you are, sort of the general area that you live in, and what sort of motivated you to get involved behind this campaign?
Yeah, I'm 19, so I'm a first year uni student. I'm studying engineering at ANU in Canberra, but I live here in Sydney originally, and I have been here for most of this year because of lockdown. I was really lucky to go to a school or a high school where we often debated politics and people really openly shared their views, and we had like great discussions, and it was a very community focused like outreach and things through school. So I think that's initially what motivated me, I guess, to just be involved in politics generally, or to pay attention to the world around me. And then I was asked to be involved in this back in March or April, when this was just North Sydney's independent. And then I got to meet Kylea, or you, a few months down the track. So at the moment, I'm running the group whose job is to mobilize young people in the community to help engage with politics generally and understand the role of independence in a general sense, but also who are supporting Kylea's campaign, or your campaign.
Thank you, Aneka. I think one of the things that I'd really love to chat with you about this morning is the fact that, I don't know, I imagine that at the moment there's a great deal of frustration when it comes to younger Australians in terms of, I know I look at my own children, so as you know, I have an 18-year-old, a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old, and they are so much more aware of the issues that matter when it comes to how our society is developing, how our planet is running and how our economy is evolving than I think I ever was. Growing up in Coonabarabran, 6 hours from Sydney, my world was my little community of 3,000 people. It was a great place to grow up. But I know, people of this generation have access to so much more information. I'm curious to hear from you. What do you think is the general feeling among younger Australians about the way that they're treated, or the attitude towards younger Australians when it comes to listening and, understanding how rights are expressed?
I think it's sort of...
Sorry, Bailey, stop it. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I think it's sort of two-pronged. On the one hand, I think that often young people are sort of underestimated or undervalued and assumed to be disinterested and lazy, when I think there's really a lot of evidence to suggest that's not the case. Like the school strike for climate, for example, is like real evidence that there are a lot of young people who care about things going on in the world.
Oh, like you keep freezing. You back?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you keep freezing.
Okay, I'm moving off Wi-Fi. I'll use my data. How much of that did you hear?
I heard you say that you think there is a sense that maybe the generation is lazy or uninvolved, but you don't think that that is actually borne out by evidence, because we see things such as the school strikes for climate action.
Yeah. And I think even like my group is evidence of that. Like I have a lot of people who have reached out to me, and the people that I'm working with are so amazing and like really care about the cause. And even like you came to one of our meetings a few weeks ago and we spent like an hour just debating policy. So I think there's that. I think there's a frustration that we're underestimated. But at the same time, I do think that there is perhaps the lack of involvement is not out of this assumed laziness, but more a sense of disillusionment, which I think is shared by people in older generations as well. Perhaps it's more striking amongst young people because there's a real sort of loss of innocence moment, I guess, in that you grow up and you're like, the world is sort of fine, and then you come to realize that that's not the reality. And because of social media, that reality hits perhaps a lot earlier than it did with previous generations because we have access to so much more information. So I think there's a problem with attitude, but there is also a real disillusionment amongst young people, which prevents them from being involved in political causes like this one.
Do you think, so for somebody like me, I mean, I'm really, I really want to understand this, because I think part of my DNA is that I have always been raised to believe that actually one of the most important things that I can do as an individual is to leave the world a better place for the people that come after me. And so I feel really strongly that, you know, all of us are merely custodians for the generations to come. And if we actually stop and think about that, the way that we interact and behave in the world becomes quite different, because your sense of ownership, you know, entitlement, those sort of things get set to the side. I think what really worries me when I talk to, you know, people under that age of 30 and 25 is this real sense that they don't feel like the older generation is listening. And there's almost this sense that they just want people to get out of the way so that you guys can get on with fixing it. And I wonder, I mean, do you hear that, Aneka? Like, am I imagining that, or is there a sense of, when you talk about frustration, is that what's driving it?
I think, yeah, I hadn't really thought about it like that, but I think that's exactly it. I think in particular with climate change, in that the actions of previous generations are then handed down, or the effects of those actions are then handed down to us. And in Australia, where there's not a lot of meaningful change happening at the moment, there's a real sense that it's just going to be left for us to deal with. But I think that sort of thing kind of happens with a lot of issues, in that the problems are then sort of just handed down. But I think because at the moment people in older generations are still in power and capable of enacting change, and they're not, that's where a lot of that frustration comes from, in that we're come on guys, you know what you should be doing, we know what you should be doing, we're 15, 20, and we know the things that you should be doing, and you're not doing them. Can you hurry up and get on? And I think that's really frustrating for a lot of people, but perhaps more so for us.
Because actually that's, you know, one of the things I want to do is pick up, because actually we do have people as young, is our youngest kind of person involved in KTNextGen at the moment, they're 15. Yeah, is that right?
16 maybe. Yeah, she's definitely not old enough to vote.
But I think to me that is something that we've seen emerge, particularly in the last 5 years, when you see people like Greta Thunberg, who's become, very well known as a young voice. And I think what I've observed there is that there have been many grown-ups, as they would like to call themselves, that have kind of dismissed her and said, how wrong it is that a young person is being used to drive this debate. I mean, from my perspective, I disagree, because I think what it is that it is this amazing moment in our society where younger voices have got more confidence and are calling out to say, look, we are actually one community, and if we all work together and meet each other in the same space, we can come up, with better solutions. When you look at our current federal government, what is it that you would like to see them be doing differently, Aneka? What do you hear from your friends when you talk about it?
Perhaps even consultation with younger generations would be good, in that because maybe a lot of us are too young to actually run for parliament or anything like that, we're less bound by sort of the restrictions of like presenting as a politician, I suppose, and therefore more free to come up with new ideas or different ideas that sort of challenge the way that we've always done things, because we haven't been doing things like that for as long as everybody else. But like particularly, I'd really like to see much more meaningful action on climate change, more representation for First Nations people and women in Parliament. Yeah, probably for me that's like the key things, and I think you're doing a really good
fantastic job. Thank you. And I mean, look, you're right. I guess that it was really evident to me pretty early on that there were 4 main areas that people, just normal people like you and me, were feeling frustrated with across the North Sydney electorate, and they were, you know, this inability to take really clear climate action. Like, what does our society look like, not by 2050, but in the next 3 years? You know, what are the steps that we're taking to actually be leaders in sustainable and renewable energy, not laggards? And that kind of then links through, so climate action, and that links through to a forward-facing economy. You know, what are the jobs that you guys will be doing, and what are the industries that we will be proudly even, you know, pioneering or leading the charge on in Australia? Are we clear about those? Are we investing behind those? Are we investing to not only drive innovation but keep it on our shores? Integrity seems to be a big one that I hear a lot of, you know, which is basic behaviour. You know, is the behaviour that we see currently being shown at the federal level good enough for us? And for most of us, it's not. You know, we all know, and you would know from your jobs and even your time at university, the behaviours that we're seeing happening down there would not be tolerated. You know, someone in your lecture would be sent from the lecture hall if they spoke to you in, you know, some of the ways that we see people speaking to each other in Canberra at the moment. And then the final one that I love that you touched on was equality, which is really about gender equality. And I think that is something that you notice, you know, as you come out and are more and more exposed to the world. Because I think when you're young, the really beautiful thing about it is that I don't know about you, but I didn't really see boys and girls as being that different. You know, all opportunities were there to be had. And I think for someone of my generation, what happened over time as I came out was that you actually realise that there is still a fair amount of gender inequality when it comes to employment opportunities and wage parity and safety at work. But also that First Nations, you know, really reconciling ourselves for who we want to be as a country. And that's where I really think that the First Nations and the engagement of people that have come to our country seeking asylum, you know, what do we look like as a society? And when I speak to people, and to yourself included, what I love is that there is this real sense of, it's courage. You know, there's a real sense that things are possible and we can change, and being open to opportunity. And I feel like that openness to opportunity is perhaps what is being lost at the moment at our federal government level. They seem to be quite jaded and wanting to keep us small and, you know, think small. So my question to you, and for, you know, what things can we be doing to actually create an environment where people under the age of, you know, 30, 25, right down to 12, actually feel really comfortable connecting with this idea of getting an independent candidate to North Sydney? What are the things that we should be looking to do more of?
I think social media is really important, in particular because that's how like we engage a lot, and perhaps how you feed people in then to doing things more in person. I think there's a real stereotype about young people spending a lot of time online, but like I think it's true. Like that's how I get a real sense of what's going on in the world. Like I read the news and things, but I get a lot from social media.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that we have this group set up that's actually a group of young people, and we're saying like we're here and we exist. Like if you're like-minded and if you're interested, then like this exists already and you can join that. And so we're looking at running a whole lot of events around that to sort of have a fun but politically oriented way into the group. And in particular, we're hosting a movie night on the 26th of November. We're screening the The Big Deal, which is a documentary about integrity in Australian politics. And we have Craig Rucastle, who's the director, who's coming to do a Q&A at the end of that, which is really exciting. We've also, on the Big Deal website, they have like a whole lot of suggestions of like fun, silly activities that you could do with the movie. So we're setting up a few things like that, like a red carpet, but like exclusively for like 3 people who've booked tickets, and everyone else has to use a sort of dodgy entrance, and just sort of ways of representing like how things are currently in politics. So I'm really looking forward to that. That's going to be the first in-person event that we've run. But I think things like that, where it's based in politics, so that there's lots of things for people to discuss, but it's also a sort of casual, fun environment, so it's approachable and easy for young people to get involved in.
And I believe you're doing that. You're actually collaborating with Jen Zali for that one too, aren't you? So it's the 2 groups, which I absolutely love. Like, I love that there's this sense of, you know, the community is our electorate, but it's actually bigger than ourselves too. We're all part of something bigger. And it's funny because I don't know about you, but whenever somebody says the word documentary, often my eyes just glaze over but I've got to say, I've seen The Big Deal, and it is a great movie, isn't it? Because it's not actually, it does have humor. It has, you know, really that human interest element. So it's actually very easy to watch, but very informing and quite challenging with some of the ideas and some of the things that they, you know, open our eyes to in terms of what's going on in politics in Australia. Yeah,
absolutely.
So how many tickets have we got for that movie? How many seats have we got? 200.
100 per electorate. So I've got to convince 100 people, and Jen Zali has to convince 100 people. Well, not convince. It's going to be awesome. No convincing is required.
I think it's more a case of, if you would like to go to an amazing night, because it's in North Sydney, is it?
Yeah, it's at the Independent Theatre in North Sydney.
Okay, so if you want to go and see a fantastic movie at the Independent Theatre in North Sydney, and you want to be with a group of around 200 people that are all on the younger end of our voting population, this is the night that you want to be at in terms of our North Sydney electorate, and also from our Manly Warringah electorate. You know, this is an opportunity to come and get to meet some people and have some interesting conversations, and to really start to think about the power of your vote. Because I guess, you know, and Aneka, this is maybe where I'd like us to finish our chat. The thing I love about our democracy and our community is that actually your vote and my vote are worth exactly the same amount when it comes to that opportunity to go in to the voting booth. And I think, for me, that's one of the things I really, really want to try and encourage people who are either first-time voting, you know, or may have only been voting for a couple of years. I really would love for younger people across our electorate to realise how powerful that is, and that they do have an opportunity. Like, you actually can change the way our country is governed by putting your vote towards a candidate, hopefully me, who, you know, you can trust to actually speak your truth to power when it comes to being in Canberra. You know, will be a consistent voice. And I guess, you know, so to anybody who's watching this at the moment, who's kind of thinking, oh, you know, I'm too young, I'm only one person, I don't know what I can do. What would you say to them? And I'm putting you completely on the spot here, so I'm sorry, but what's your key message to young people across our electorate? What's the opportunity for them?
I don't think that you're ever too young or powerless to make a change. And I think this is exactly an example to illustrate that. Like, being able to organize in a group, like community organize, is a really important way that you can make change. And the fact that everyone's vote is equal, as you said, I think comes with a responsibility for you to really think about and care about your vote, just like because other people do that. And like, if other people are going to do that, then you owe it to them to do the same, so that we're all finding candidates and people who can make the changes that we really want to see.
That was gold. I think we need to bottle that. So you are never too young and powerless to make the change that you want to see. That your vote, everybody's vote, is equal and fair in the line of sight, and that opportunity brings with it a responsibility also to use it wisely and to actually express it in a way that brings about the future you want to see. So Aneka, thank you so much. I know you've just finished exams, so you're probably only just kind of de-stressing, but thank you for chatting to me today. But also, more importantly, just thank you for, standing up and being counted. And I know, look, and I can see a lot of the other, KTNextGen crew are on at the moment watching. So thanks for coming, guys.
Dan's the link to the event for anyone who wants it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dan. And to the entire crew, thank you so much for everything you're doing. And to anybody watching this, so the key message is, if you have somebody in your life who is under the age of 30, who is potentially interested in connecting with a wider group of younger people from across our electorate to actually really help ensure that we are connecting to younger communities as effectively as possible, please reach out to Aneka. And what's the best way to connect with you, Aneka?
I don't mind. I respond to all the socials, but probably via email is good, which is nextgen@kyleatink.com.au. It's on the website. But yeah.
Okay, nextgen@kylea.tink.com.au. But as Aneka says, I know she also responds to all the socials. So, guys, please get involved. Let me hear you. Let me hear your voice. And just know that it's a massive, massive responsibility for me. And I also think of it as a privilege to be the person that, can potentially go to Canberra and make sure that your voice is heard down there. So thank you. Thanks. Have a lovely day, Aneka. And thanks everyone for joining us. And I will see everyone next Tuesday for another Tea with Tink. As always, if there's somebody in your wider circle that you think would be great to join me for a tea with Tink, please just drop me an email, a message. I'm a bit more old school, so it's probably reach out to info@kyleatink.com.au and give us some of those suggestions for people we could speak to. These conversations are so important because these are the conversations that are not currently being had in a way that we can all participate in when it comes to our federal government level. So, help me keep learning, help our community keep growing, and have a fantastic day. Thanks so much, Aneka.
Thank you.
See you guys. Bye.
Authorised by Kylea Tink, North Sydney, New South Wales.